But first, let's look at the Albanese government's war against cars. You know, the cars that people actually want to drive, not the electric vehicles that they are being cajoled into purchasing, despite how unsuitable or how expensive they may be. Motoring groups are warning that for Australia to reach its emission reduction target set by the Brains Trust of Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese, for that target to be met, at least half of the new utes sold in Australia would have to be electric by 2029. That just ain't going to happen without some harsh, ugly market manipulation. Even then, it seems highly unlikely. Writing about the government's emissions reduction plan in today's Telly, James Morrow notes that Bowen and co are being less than forthcoming about the impact of these radical policies. He writes, to listen to Bowen and the EV lobby, which has an absolutely vested interest in steering drivers away from petrol and diesel, the strategy will simultaneously increase the choice of electrics on offer while not making conventional Rangers, Mustangs and Land Cruisers more pricey. But come on, the most basic market economics tells us this is impossible. The whole point of the scheme is to make it less attractive for consumers to buy and for automakers to sell petrol and diesel vehicles, and cheaper for them to buy EVs. They'll do this by imposing costs on cars with big emissions and make automakers pass the charge on to consumers. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gada here. Kosha, these policies are flawed on so many levels, including the unsuitability of EVs for working vehicles in Australian conditions.
It is, and they keep marching forward. Every day it seems like there's a new push, a new regulation, a new incentive, and it's always cloaked under the veneer of, it's just more choice. We're not making it more difficult for you to buy what you want to buy, but we all know that that's not true, as you said, with basic market economics. And I would even zoom back just the big picture for Australia specifically. Realistically, I mean, a population of less than 30 million people, a resource-heavy economy, let's be real. Even if you reduced emissions of the average human being by 5%, it is not going to make any difference on the planet. So this is all feel-good showboating, and the show continues.
Now, the war against cars continues in Green Heartland, the city of Yarra. That's the Anti-Australia Day far-left council. That is I think it's the country's first Greens-led and Greens-dominated council. So it's not surprising to see this. The ABC reports City of Yarra has voted to explore higher parking fees and costs for drivers of large SUVs and trucks. The proposed plan will investigate ways to make travelling on Yarra streets more equitable. That's my favourite Marxist word. It sounds so warm and cosy. It ain't. Kosha, the motion also suggests imposing proportional parking fees based on the size of the vehicle. So if you've got a four-wheel drive, you might pay more for an hour of parking than if you have, a little tiny EV.
Discriminating on the basis of size can't be done in different contexts. It is that, I think that word is a tell. In this case, it's a few things. So one, it is that ideology of climate change and what they think they're doing to that, as we discussed. But specifically for the Yarra City Council, like many city councils, it's kind of broke and has been running a deficit. I think there was a report that came out under the Andrews administration about how unsustainable fiscally it's been running. So I'm sure that's part of this too, that there's another revenue stream that they might be able to get out of this. And it's, again, also a transfer of wealth a little bit, because a lot of those larger vehicles, pickup trucks and the likes, maybe working class or, other types of people who buy them. So you've got the elites that can afford EVs having their benefit transferred on as a burden to people who drive more working class cars.
Well, I know a couple of City of Yarra dwellers who, though very well off, don't even have cars. They just catch Ubers everywhere. And
good point.
You can do that if you live, 5 minutes from the city, but it's not an option for everybody. Now, let's go to the UK, where the NHS has announced they will stop prescribing puberty blockers to minors. This is enormous news. This is after a review found there was not enough evidence that the treatment was safe or effective. It's a major win in the fight against transgender medicine dogma that sees thousands of vulnerable children irreversibly damaged every year. But Kosha, Aussie kids are still at risk. They can still access puberty blockers because Australia has yet to undergo the same critical evidence-based review of the practice as Europe has and much of North America. And we've adopted this gender-affirming care dogma uncritically in this country. And we are increasingly an outlier because we have seen parts of North America review these practices. Some have banned it. We've seen Scandinavia lead the way in many ways. The UK, Australia, we're not even looking at what's happening. We're not even assessing whether these practices are harmful.
So true. Scandinavia has been ahead of the curve. This is huge news from the UK. Some states in the US are doing it. Some are still awful, as you mentioned. I think, again, for whatever reason in this space, Australia is behind the curve. I think for me, it also reminds me of the way Australian leaders conducted themselves during COVID as well. And there's just so much of this blind trust in the medical establishment, quote unquote, that for some reason is lockstep over here. But hopefully, as we see other countries peel this back, it might trickle down and have an effect here. I don't think we'll see. It would be great if we did, but some accountability. So it's great that they're reversing in the UK, and hopefully they will here as well. But there's no accountability of people that were pushing it before. I don't think we'll ever see that, but at least the trend is moving in the right direction.
Now, former CIA Director John Brennan, that's the man who spied on Trump during the 2016 campaign. He was an enthusiastic participant in pushing the Russian collusion hoax, and he even lied about Hunter Biden's laptop during the 2020 campaign, claiming falsely it was Russian disinformation. Well, somehow he's not in jail, but he's on MSNBC saying his colleagues still working in the intelligence community will likely withhold information from Donald Trump once he formally becomes the Republican nominee.
This traditionally is provided to the candidates for president. I'm pretty certain that my former intelligence colleagues will provide briefings that are not going to do any type of damage to sources and methods in terms of providing information to Donald Trump that he could misuse. But they will provide analytic overviews and briefings about some of the world's hotspots. Letting Donald Trump know what the assessments are at this point. So I think it's going to be analysis that will be devoid of the sources and methods, the sensitive things that we are most concerned about, the types of things that were in all those documents that he had in the bathroom and other areas in Mar-a-Lago. But I do think it makes sense. Now, it's a question about whether or not Donald Trump will accept the briefings. And I'm sure that if he does accept them, he probably will disparage them, as he has disparaged U.S. intelligence officers as well as U.S. intelligence itself for so long, over so many years.
What sensible person doesn't disparage the so-called American intelligence community, the spies who lie? And as you can see, Brennan, he's right in the middle there. He's a repeat offender, Kosha. This seems astonishing to me that you could have this conspiracy amongst intelligence community to withhold information from a presidential candidate.
Like we just talked about with the previous topic, the lack of accountability in leadership, whether it's healthcare there or the intel community here, I think that's a running theme. This is why trust in these institutions is at an all-time low, including in the intel community. So even if he continues along that line, that he's not on the winning side of it in terms of broader trust in the issue. And it's also quite telling, I think, that what they're accusing Trump of, subverting democracy, destroying norms, this is basically that, as he said, that the traditional norm is that the leader, the presumptive, or the leader of either major party is entitled to getting these intelligence briefings. It's a longstanding tradition so that they're kind of ready to hit the ground running if they were to be elected. And that is a longstanding norm, but, unelected bureaucrats can decide when the norms make sense and when they don't.
Well said. It's so much of what they claim is pure projection. They're doing precisely what they accuse their opponents of doing. Now, let's go to this Kate photo scandal. I can't believe we're talking about this, I think, for a third day now, but CNN has announced they will review all photos from the Princess of Wales after she admitted to experimenting with editing with her Mother's Day photo of her and her 3 children. A lot of people are accepting that explanation, Kosha. I've got to say, I said it yesterday, I don't buy it. I don't buy that Kate is the one who's responsible for all these fake elements in this photo. I think she's been made to take the blame for someone else's mistake, although you would think the palace is, I don't know, media savvy enough to handle this a little bit better. This is a massive own goal. There is a theory online gathering steam. We brought it to you first last night, and it's now being reported widely that the photo that we saw is actually using an image from Kate from a Vogue cover shoot in 2016. That would be wild if that's true. I'm not sure if I believe that, Kosha, but I do believe Kate has taken the blame. I don't know who manipulated this photo. I don't know if they can actually release the real photo and tell us there's nothing more to this. It was just fixing up a couple of little things, because this has given birth to even sensible people coming up with all sorts of conspiracy theories about her absence, her health, why we're being presented with fake photos.
So true. It doesn't add up. All those things you mentioned don't add up. And whoever manipulated the photo, it was an unforced error. It would have been, obviously there was a void, or there's this demand from the public to know what's going on with her health. They felt the need to do something. It was Mother's Day. Somebody should have caught this. I also don't understand why it doesn't add up to me why she would have been made the fall guy in this. Like, why not name some unnamed photo editor? From the palace.
One of her assistants, unnamed.
They do that all the time. So, like, why make her take the blame? That doesn't add up to me either. And just on the CNN thing that you mentioned, that's fine if they want to blow that out of proportion a little bit, but I would say that they have bigger issues. They've gotten a lot of reporting wrong. They settled with Nick Sandman and other cases in recent memory. Clean up that reporting before going after looking at all of the Princess of Wales's photos from the past.
Can you just see all the resources, people with a magnifying glass trying to figure out why the picture isn't looking as they expect? Now, of course, the internet has gone wild, manipulating the photo further for a few laughs. Many of these I can't show you, but here are a couple of the wholesome examples. I like this one. It's obviously a cat person has manipulated this image, and I think the North Melbourne Football Club will be happy with this one, which is also doing the rounds. Now, Harry and Meghan think they would never have made such an embarrassing mistake, because Meghan has a keen eye and freakish attention to detail. This is according to a close source. The source also says the couple would have been annihilated if they had secretly photoshopped images of themselves and their families. But hello, short memories. The Sun reveals this photo of the Sussexes announcing their pregnancy was heavily doctored. That tree, Kosha, wasn't even there. They photoshopped that tree into that photo afterwards. So it's interesting, though, isn't it, that no one really made a fuss about that. But with this, possibly because Kate hasn't been seen for months, it is a big issue.
Yep. I think that's part of it. Some nerdy people are describing the difference between the foreground and the subject of the photo and the background, and the tree is the background. So that isn't as terrible as the front, and like all sorts of people in the camps who are fighting, pitting the Sussexes against the Cambridges are having a field day with this. But again, it was an unforced error. I don't know why it happened, and hopefully it'll run its course, and we'll have more important things to focus on soon.
Well, this is more important. After decades of communism and Peronism in Argentina, the new government has just made some incredible ground. Javier Milei has slashed inflation and delivered the first monthly budget surplus in 12 years. He's called the Argentinian Trump, and he has managed to slow the world's highest inflation rate from 25.5% in December. That's just the monthly rate. He's slashed it almost half to 13.2% in February. He's halved the value of the peso. He's made sweeping cuts to state spending and also streamlined welfare programs. It's early days, Kosha. We shouldn't get too excited. But how is Milei making such a dramatic impact so quickly?
Such a fascinating story. His whole election and then what he's done. I think it's 100 days in office. In that time, I think the overarching issue here is he's racing against time. Like, the situation in Argentina is so dire that he is running against the clock, and that gives him license to really do drastic things that, frankly, other countries would benefit from, but it's not so bad yet, so nobody does it. So he has slashed, I think, 300 jobs in the federal government. He fired one person on the air, on TV, because he's also a master of media, so he knows how to make things travel. He removed pricing caps and things like that, which actually short-term increased inflation a little bit, but he did that because there's just too much involvement and interference by the economy, and he's trying to simplify those things. He's a free market guy. He did devalue the peso by 50%, which again initially had some negative blowback, but he had the courage to do it, and the reason, his theory for that is it'll make exports more affordable from Argentina, which will bring revenue in. So he's got a whole economic policy. He's fearlessly executing it, and I think the world is watching with fascination and learnings that we can take.